The Makin Island raid was an attack by the United States Marine Corps raiders on Japanese military forces on Makin Island in the Pacific Ocean. The aim was to destroy Japanese installations, take prisoners, gain intelligence on the Gilbert Islands area, and divert Japanese attention and reinforcements from the Allied landings on Guadalcanal and Tulungi. Preparations and organization. The raid was among the first American offensive ground combat operations of World War II. The force was drawn from the 2nd Raider Battalion and comprised a small battalion command group and two of the battalion's 6 rifle companies. Because of space limitations aboard ship, each company embarked without one of its rifle sections. Battalion headquarters. A company and 18 men from B Company, totaling 121 troops, were embarked aboard the submarine Argonaut, and the remainder of B Company, totaling 90 men, aboard Nautilus. The raiding force was designated Task Group 7.15. The Makin Atoll Garrison was formed in 1942 as part of the Marshall Islands Garrison and called the 62nd Garrison Force. At the time of the Makin raid, the total force opposing the American landings consisted of 71 armed personnel of the Japanese seaplane base led by Warrant Officer Kyozaburo Kanematsu of the Special Naval Landing Force equipped with light weapons. In addition, there were also 4 members of the seaplane tender base and 3 members of a meteorological unit. 2 civilian personnel were attached to the Japanese forces as interpreters and civilian administrators. Execution of the raid. The Marine Raiders were launched in LCRL rubber boats powered by small, 6-horsepower outboard motors shortly after 0000 on the 17th of August. At 5:13, Companies A and B of the 2nd Raider Battalion, commanded by Lt. Col. Evans Carlson, successfully landed on Makin. The landing had been very difficult due to rough seas, high surf, and the failure of many of the outboard motors. Lt. Col. Carlson decided to land all his men on one beach, rather than 2 beaches as originally planned. At 5:15, Lt. Oscar Petros and a 12-man squad landed on Makin. In the confusion of the landing, they did not get word of Carlson's decision to change plans and land all the raiders on one beach. Thus, Petros and his men landed where they originally planned. It turned out to be a fortunate error. Undaunted by the lack of support, Petros led his men inland. At 700, with Company A leading, the raiders advanced from the beach across the island to its north shore before attacking southwestward. Strong resistance from Japanese snipers and machine guns stalled the advance and inflicted casualties. The Japanese then launched 2 banzai charges that were wiped out by the raiders, thus killing most of the Japanese on the island. At 900, Lt. Petros and his 12 men found themselves behind the Japanese, who were fighting the rest of the raiders to the east. Petros's unit killed 8 Japanese and the garrison commander Sergeant Major Kanematsu knocked out a machine gun and destroyed the enemy radios, but suffered 3 dead and 2 wounded. Failing to contact Carlson, they withdrew to the subs at dusk as planned. At 13:30, 12 Japanese planes, including 2 flying boats, arrived over Makin. The flying boats, carrying reinforcements for the Japanese garrison, attempted to land in the lagoon, but were met with machine gun, rifle and boys anti-tank rifle fire from the raiders. 1 plane crashed, the other burst into flames. The remaining planes bombed and strafed but inflicted no U.S. casualties. Evacuation of the raiders. At 1930, the raiders began to withdraw from the island using 18 rubber boats, many of which no longer had working outboard motors. Despite heavy surf, 7 boats with 93 men made it to the subs. The next morning, several boatloads of raiders were able to fight the surf and reach the sub, but 72 men, along with just 3 rubber boats, were still on the island. At 23:30, the attempt by most of the raiders to reach the submarines failed. Despite hours of heroic effort, 11 of 18 boats were unable to breach the unexpectedly strong surf, having lost most of their weapons and equipment. The exhausted survivors struggled back to the beach to link up with 20 fully armed men who had been left on the island to cover their withdrawal. An exhausted and dispirited Carlson dispatched a note to the Japanese commander offering to surrender, but the Japanese messenger was killed by other Marines who were unaware of Carlson's plan. At 900 on the 18th of August, the subs sent a rescue boat to stretch rope from the ships to the shore that would allow the remaining raiders' boats to be pulled out to sea. But just as the operation began, Japanese planes arrived and attacked, sinking the rescue boat and attacking the subs, which were forced to crash dive and wait on the bottom the rest of the day. The subs were undamaged. At 23:08, having managed to signal the subs to meet his raiders at the entrance to Makin Lagoon, Carlson had a team, led by Lt. Charlie Lamb, build a raft made up of 3 rubber boats and 2 native canoes, powered by the 2 remaining outboard motors. Using this raft, 72 exhausted raiders sailed 4 miles from Makin to the mouth of the lagoon, where the subs picked them up. Casualties: USMC casualties were given as 18 killed in action and 12 missing in action. Of the 12 Marines missing in action, 1 was later identified among the 19 Marine Corps graves found on Makin Island. Of the remaining 11 Marines missing in action, 9 were inadvertently left behind or returned to the island during the night withdrawal. They were subsequently captured, moved to Kwajalein Atoll, and executed by Japanese forces. Koso Abe was subsequently tried and executed by the Allies for the murder of the 9 Marines. The remaining 2 Marines missing in action have never been accounted for. Carlson reported that he had personally counted 83 Japanese bodies and estimated that 160 Japanese were killed based on reports from the Makin Island natives with whom he spoke. Additional Japanese personnel may have been killed in the destruction of 2 boats and 2 aircraft. Morrison states that 60 Japanese were killed in the sinking of one of the boats. Japanese records are however more precise, and the entire garrison casualties were 46 killed of all ranks. This was confirmed when supporting Japanese forces returned to the island and found 27 Japanese survivors of the raid. Conclusions: although the Marine raiders succeeded in annihilating the Japanese garrison on the island, the raid failed to meet its other material objectives. No Japanese prisoners were taken, and no meaningful intelligence was collected. Also, no significant Japanese forces were diverted from the Solomon Islands area. In fact, because the vulnerabilities to their garrisons in the Gilbert Islands were highlighted by the raid, the Japanese strengthened their fortifications and defensive preparations on the islands in the Central Pacific. As a result, the objective to dissipate Japanese forces may have had the unintended consequence of causing heavier losses for U.S. forces during the battles of the Gilbert and Marshall Islands campaigns. However, the raid did succeed in its objectives of boosting morale and testing raider tactics. Bioarchaeological recovery. In 2000, 58 years after the raid, the remains of 19 Marines were found on Makin Island through bioarchaeological excavation and recovery, then sent to the Defense Department's Central Identification Laboratory in Hawaii, where they were identified. 6 of these Marines were returned to their families for private burial ceremonies. The remaining 13 were buried with full honors at Arlington National Cemetery after a funeral service at Fort Myer Chapel, at which the Marine Commandant General James L. Jones spoke. The remaining 11 Marines have not yet been located.